Hi, and welcome back to Kitchen Table Talks 40th Anniversary Edition, a series of conversations where we speak to the 40-year history of Every Person Influences Children and talk to people who really helped shape it into the way it is today. I'm here today with Hope Hawkins, who is the daughter of our founder, Robert Wilson. Hope, thank you so much for being here today.
This is wonderful. I'm excited. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So, starting off, so many people know Bob Wilson as the founder of Epic, but not a lot of people understand why he was driven to create this organization. So can you speak a little bit to how this all began 40 years ago?
Well, I was living in Scotland in an international community for kids with disabilities. And I got a phone call. One of my kids woke me up in the morning and said, "Your dad is on the phone." And I talked to my father and he just said, your mother is in heaven. And I just assumed, given our family and how we've always been a loving family and all was well, that it must be something medical. So I didn't even ask him what was wrong. But I went home that very night, only to realize that a 14-year-old boy had actually murdered my mother. He had been, he came to the house to burglarize. And, obviously no one knows exactly what happened. But my mother died and my father was absolutely broken. And I guess you'd have to know my parents, my mother and my father, because they were the most wonderful team in the world. They'd been married for years and years, and they'd be skipping together, and then they'd have important talks together and decision-making together. They hardly did anything without the other knowing about it, at least. So this was absolutely devastating to him. I came home from Scotland and moved in with him for a year. And I watched him every single day. He would go down to the basement. He would take out a clean sheet of paper and he would write a letter to every single person who wrote to him and with their condolences about my mother's death. And I said, "Oh, Dad, why don't you just print the sucker and get it off?" And he said, "No, each person has taken time to respond to me. I need to respond to each person." And at first I thought, this is really unhealthy for him to do this. But then as I thought about it, I thought, this is so Dad, really wanting to connect with people and be able to send them personal messages. So literally it took him about a year to respond to all the letters, because of course he wasn't going to stick with one paragraph. It was, the whole shebang, and probably, how the person he had met, and, just sort of reframing all the experiences they had had together. So he was very, very broken and very sad, but very brave and fairly humorless. And then he started to be angry, and he started to do some research. And this boy who had murdered my mother was actually a kid who we had hired to do some work around our farm. And he had actually played with some of the grandchildren. And in the yearbook in his school, there's a picture of him fishing in our pond. So the whole circumstances were so strange in that we knew this child. What we didn't know about the child is what Dad found out, and that was that the boy had been living with 11 different foster homes in the space of 14 years. And his thought was, how could this possibly happen, that this child would be subject to so many different home environments? And he started to develop a real compassion for the child in terms of thinking, my God, this is a terrible situation. And somehow the social services hadn't come out. There was the foster parents who had the boy in their care, had asked for help and no one had come. So Dad thought, I really want to get involved with child abuse issues. So Dad began to get very involved with child abuse issues. And his sadness turned to anger and disbelief that our country is in such a position where we desperately need guidance for kids at an early age. And so after a while, he started thinking, we've got to start with kids from the get-go and teach them how to be effective parents. And we've got to help the parents to be effective. And he started to get a little bit of lilt in his stride. And he started thinking, I think I want to begin something. I want to start something that's going to make a difference. You know, this kind of thing that happened to us as a family, I don't want any other family to ever experience that. So he got involved with a wonderful woman called Sandra Rifkin, who became the first head of EPIC, and Sharon, who was a wonderful assistant, and Sally, who he eventually, my stepmother, he married. So all these strong, wonderful female figures came into his life. He has 4 daughters. So this was just a continuation of the great impotence and or potency of a female world. So Dad was very, very happy about that. So he was very excited about EPIC, and I really saw him transform during that time from somebody who was just broken by the devastation of the experience to anger that this could happen to somebody, and then generalizing and thinking, I want to devote my life, the rest of my life, to what became EPIC in honor of my wife, Penny. And Sally was wonderful because she understood that he had a passion that he needed to drive home, and she had the patience of Job. So that's a little background as to what happened and how it began.